This video is created and distributed with the permission of the Kabbalah Society, who are the sole copyright holder of this book. Please subscribe to be notified of when more chapters and books come out on this channel. Figure 10. Beginnings. Here the name of Ein, meaning nothingness, and Ein Sof, the limitless, hover beyond existence. In order for existence to come into being, the Absolute withdrew to allow a space for it to be. This was accomplished by Ein Sofer, the light of the endless, symbolizing the will of the Absolute. Into the void are emanated the 10 Sefriot. This primordial realm is called Absolute in Hebrew, which means to stand next to. In this case, the ultimate. Here begins a vast process by which God will behold God in the mirror of existence. Picture by James Russell, 20th century. Chapter 3. The Great Tree of Absolute. God does not exist. God is beyond existence. God is Ayin, no thing. Out of no thing comes Ein Sof, or the infinite all. Within Ein Sof's boundlessness, something comes into unmanifest reality. It is hidden in the utter stillness and concealed within the complete silence. Some Kabbalists call this the place without end. Out of endlessness comes the will of Ein Sof. It retracts, or some say, it concentrates or even radiates to allow the manifest world to emerge out of the unmanifest. The will of Ein Sof, coming out of concealment, is called Ein Sof Or. Light, Or in Hebrew, being the symbol of will. The way in which the light permeates unmanifest existence has been a matter of debate for many centuries. However, this is not a disagreement, so much as a search for a way of expressing a divine event, the full nature of which is only known to God. Many analogies have been put forward, but only as metaphors. Alas, they are often taken for the reality. One analogy for the first manifestation of will out of unmanifest existence is a dimensionless point. This dot of manifest existence is the source of everything that was, is, and will be. It is I am, and in Kabbalah it is called the first crown, the ancient one, and the white head. From here emanate the 10 utterances that bring the relative world into being. In an instantaneous progression, the 10 divine principles, the attributes of God, or Sephirot, are realized like an eternal lightning flash. The Sephirot are Keter, or the crown, Chokmah, or wisdom, Binah, or understanding, Hesed, or mercy, Gevurah, or judgment, Tiferet, or beauty, Netzer, or eternity, Hod, or reverberation, Yesod, or foundation, and Malkut, or the kingdom. There is an 11th non-Sephirah between Binah and Hesed, called Dart, or knowledge, but this performs a special role. There are several names to some Sephirot, both in English and Hebrew. Gevurah, whose root is might, is sometimes called Din, or Pachad, which means severity or fear. And Hod and Netzer may be translated by glory and victory. The names used in this work are based on the original Hebrew root, so that Hod, for instance, when translated as reverberation, makes precise sense, while the word glory tells us nothing of its sephirotic function, not to mention the fact that the term glory is also used sometimes for Tiferet and the world of Absolute. Similarly, for Netzer, we use the translation eternity, which means, in this sephirotic context, to repeat or endlessly turn. According to tradition, the word Sephirot means sapphires or sparkling lights. They have also been called numbers, degrees, vessels, powers, garments, crowns, and many other names. This illustrates the flexibility of Hebrew and of Kabbalah. There is no hardened dogmatic form, although the principles remain the same. In one century, they were called the inner faces of God. In another, the primordial days. This leads on to the subject of the arrangement of their progression. Beginning with the one, expressed in the first crown, the perfect manifest unity divides into two. The second stage being an active manifestation. This was then completed by its passive opposite, so that three Sephirot came into existence out of the place of equilibrium. Moreover, their relationship was not perfect because the impulse of divine will had made a tension between them. Nevertheless, in terms of a now relative existence, they were in working balance, although this had constantly to be maintained. The three were, and still are, called the supernals, and represent the eternal divine within manifest existence. They are the Holy of Holies. Over the centuries, the active and passive Sephirot of the supernal triad acquired many analogical descriptions, but perhaps the most evocative are those of the Great Father and Mother. Their role in the complex system that was to follow was to head the two opposing and complementary poles or columns of mercy and severity, which, in more earthly definitions, are known as the pillars of force and form. It is said that Chokmah, or wisdom, was the first thought after the impulse of will emanating from Keter, the crown, and that Binah, or understanding, was the passive formulation of the idea in the divine intellect. However, nothing further could happen until the will from Keter, operating down the central column, helped the lightning flash across the gap occupied by the non-Sephira dart to pick up the power of the active column again. This gap or interval is known as the abyss, and is a crucial point in descending or ascending the tree that is beginning to come into being. The impulse joins the pillar of force at Hesed, or mercy, whose principle is that of expanding power. Here, that which is manifesting grows and would dissipate itself if it were not checked by Gevurah, the principle of limitation. This illustrates how the Sephirot work in pairs across the tree, balancing and checking one another, while being supervised from above and imparting power and control to those below. An unbalanced situation is described in early Kabbalistic literature, which tells of the making of the first worlds. In them, one or other of the pillars predominated, so that one universe diffused itself with overactivity, and another collapsed into itself in excessive contraction. Without severity or judgment, says the Talmud, the world would have excessive evil, and without mercy, existence would be unbearably rigorous. When sufficient equilibrium was obtained, the universe became stable, but only within certain limits. Anything out of this relative norm becomes dangerous to it, and generates what is symbolically known as evil. The economy of the body is a parallel. Any molecular, cellular, or physical excess of growth or of restraint, of force or of form, causes it to be ill and sometimes die. As balance is critical in the human organism, so it is in the great tree, upon whose principles the body is modelled. Figure 11. Octave. In addition to the Sephiroth and paths, there is the lightning flash, which comes from the crown. This travels down the tree, from side to side, in an octave that has its first interval at Dart, and its second at Yesod. These are crucial pause points in any process, going up or down within the tree. Consider the morning and afternoon breaks at work, for people to pause and review what they are doing. Here also are seen the upper and lower faces of the tree. These are fixed, unlike the triad of Tiferet, Gevurah and Hesed, which is able to maneuver. This is the area of free will. Continuing the lightning flash, the relationship between Hesed and Gevurah helps to form, in their synthesis, the Sephirah Tiferet, or beauty, on the central column. This lower triad is called by some Kabbalists the triad of divine emotion and morality. The title has no meaning at this point, but it will later, when we apply the tree to man, who is made in the same image as his maker. The application of the word emotion to the world of absolute, or emanation, caused much trouble for Kabbalists through the ages, because their more literal brethren always saw everything in natural terms. Several Kabbalistic works outlining the nature of the divine world were disapproved of by the Orthodox establishment of the period as making an image of God contrary to the second commandment. But this commandment applies to the absolute beyond even existence. The absolutic world, to which most of these documents referred, is already several removes from Ein, or no thing, and the detailed descriptions written up in the visionary book, the Shir Komar, and even Zohar were no more than outlines of Adam Kadmon, the primal man. The head, the beard, even the divine body and its dimensions described were only metaphysical symbols to illustrate the nature of the world of absolute. Without these analogies, natural man would have no information on the world of emanations. This is why the Tree of Life became the most acceptable symbol in Kabbalah. Not only did it contain all the information required for theory and practice, but it was an image of nothing literally seeable in the heavens above or in the earth beneath. Figure 12. Adam Kadmon. The figure in Ezekiel's vision is presented here in the form of a prayer. The crown and the two arms hint at the Tree of Life. Adam Kadmon, or the primordial image of the divine, was also called the Kavod, or glory of God. It was seen by mystics as a vast figure, with specific measurements that had a specific meaning. Some believed the Kavod to be an archangel. This led to much learned debate about its substantiality. Some rabbinic scholars have a tendency to take things literally, as they have no experience of other realities beyond physicality. The image is of a Kabbalistic prayer. The Sephirah Tiferet is the heart of the tree. It lies halfway between the top and bottom Sephirot on the column of equilibrium. As the central focus, it performs a vital task, for it joins and reconciles the flow of various paths that come through its junction station. It is called adornment as well as beauty, because it is the result of the other Sephirot and, unlike them, has no particular function other than to be. It is called the seat of Solomon for the obvious reason that it has access to wisdom and understanding, mercy and judgment, as well as the Sephirot below it. Placed between the non-Sephirah of Dart, knowledge, it is also named Thou, or the Holy One, blessed be He. These names refer to the manifestation of the presence of God in the heart of existence. Tiferet forms, with the two lower Sephirot of Hod and Netzah, the beginning of a reflection of the three supernals, but on a lesser level. The geometric figure composed of Keter, Hokmah, Binah, and Tiferet is repeated by Tiferet, Netzer, Hod, and Malkut, with Dart and Yesod in the same relative positions. Known as the upper and lower faces, they perform as an upper complex of mercy and a lower complex of severity, so that heaven and earth, yet another analogy of this relationship, reflect the left and right pillars, but in the vertical axis. The moral triad of mercy, judgment, and beauty forms a separate triangle between the two faces that is crucial in the relationship between the upper and lower parts of the tree, in the divine as well as in man. Netzer, or eternity, and Hod, or reverberation, perform as the lowest working sephirot of the two outer functional pillars. Netzer, on the column of force, cycles power into the complex, while Hod reverberates the impulse throughout the tree. This is possible because, as it will be remembered, there were 10 minarot in the temple. That is one complete miniature tree within each sephira of the great tree of Absolute. This facilitates inter-sephirotic relationships and enables each sephira to possess an active and passive aspect, as well as all the qualities of the subtree that composes it. The idea of trees within trees was developed by some Kabbalists into many levels of subtle underlay. Each Kabbalist has his particular interest. In the divine names attributed to the tree, that of hosts is described to Hod and Netzer, each carrying the active and passive aspect of the divine, so that the various tasks to be carried out can be implemented. The image of Netzer and Hod as the right and left legs of the primal man, Adam Kadmon, indicates their function as supports. Figure 13. Creation. Here, a second world emerges out of the primordial realm of God names. At its crown is the combined holy name, Yahweh Elohim. This is the Creator at work, directly below that of Ehyeh, or I am that I am. The word that, in this context, is existence, which is the mirror by which the Absolute beholds itself. Out of this combination of the three supernal heads, as they are called, comes the first day of light and dark, or the separation of the emerging lower worlds from the divine. There then follows the 6 other days and the creation of a second spiritual Adam, who is both male and female. The description for this diagram is on the bottom of the next page, but I will read it here now. Figure 14, Jacob's Ladder. Here, the 4 trees that have been manifested are locked together into the great 5th tree, with the line of the Kav, or grace, running up and down the centre. This allows the divine access to every level within all existence. Split a stone, and I am there, said a Kabbalistic master. Within the scheme are the 9 rungs to ascend. These are on the central column, with Dart as the final veil before the face of the deity. Yesod, the foundation of the Sephirotic tree, performs as the last interval of an octave, developing down from the first do of Keter. In this musical analogy, the notes Re and Mi are played by Chokmah and Bina, with the first interval at Dart. Hesed performs as Fa, with Sol at Gevurah. Teferet on the midpoint is the essence of the octave, its place containing all that has been brought into existence and all that will be manifest. It has no note of its own, because it is all of them in the great monochord, stretched between the end and the beginning and back again. Netzer and Hod take the impulse on down to the last interval, before it hits the sephira of Malkut that absorbs in its composition of force, form, and consciousness the densest but richest combination of divine substance. The relationship between Yesod, the foundation, and Malkut, the kingdom, is very particular, because Malkut is the only Sephira that has no direct connection with Tiferet. Yesod, therefore, is a bridge and a barrier to anything coming down or rising up. A very important point in the theory and practice of Kabbalah. Yesod sits at the center of the lower face. As the focus of all the lower Sephirot, it performs as the first and last step in manifestation and realization that is coming away from or returning to the source of all, symbolized by Keter in the relative world. In Yesod, the image comes into being and casts shape, life, and will into the materiality of Malkut. Malkut, the kingdom, is said to be the dwelling place of the Shekinah, the divine presence. Traditionally composed of the most elemental levels of the divine world of Azalut, it represents the last stage in the calling forth, creating, forming, and making of Adam Kadmon, whose feet touch the uppermost part of incarnated man. This Sephira, situated at the bottom of the great tree, is by no means the least important. Indeed, all the Sephirot are equally important because, as the symbol of Adam Kadmon, the primordial man, illustrates, they are all part of a unified being. Malkut is the last stage of emanation, the eternal realm above the world of creation. Here, the archetypal tree of all the lower worlds was completed and stabilized. Left was balanced with right, above with below, and all interconnected by a system of paths and triads that acted as a template for any complete organism that was to be subsequently created, formed, and made. This arrangement contained all the laws required to run the universe. It expressed in its form, force, and will the oneness of all and its source. In this system was the complement of opposites and the development of 10 stages, which related a series of triads to a central column of consciousness which, in turn, was flanked by an active and passive set of triads attached to each functional side pillar. These triads, modelled on the supernal triangle, transmitted the will descending from above to the furthest corner of the world. As the octave of the lightning flash passes between the crown and the kingdom, and back again, it also unfolds in 4 great stages expressed in the words of Isaiah 43:7. I have called, created, formed, and made him. These 4 levels inherent in the Azalutic tree, see figure 6, generate 3 lower worlds which periodically develop out of its unchanging eternity into time. That is, cosmic existence, with all its processes of birth, growth, decay, and death. Such great universal cycles, called Shmitot, have fascinated some Kabbalists and underlie the rarely understood word Jubilee, which describes the end of a cosmic cycle, when all things return to the perfect state of the divine Sephirotic world, or Azalut. The brief of this study, however, is primarily concerned with the practice of Kabbalah, and so only an outline of the origin of the worlds will be given. Azalut is the world that was called forth out of the unmanifest by the 10 utterances of God. As emanation emerges from En Sof Or, so the separated worlds emanate out of the 4 levels of Azalut. Thus, from the creative zone of the divine comes the world of Berea, which manifests diagrammatically as a creative subtree, springing from the midst of the Azalutic tree. The impulse then continues, in that out of the cosmic world of Berea emerges the tree of the world of formation, whose root lies in the Yeseratic level of Azalut. In the same way, the Asiatic level of the world of emanation generates the world of making, which comes out in series from the midst of Yetzirah, thus completing a sequential scheme of 3 lower worlds beneath, but contained in a divine world of unchanging unity. As there are several versions of how the 4 levels fit into the Azalitic tree, so there are various models of the 4 worlds and their relationship to one another in Kabbalistic literature. These are all within a broad band, correct and incorrect, because they are all subjective views of an objective world. This is only from our viewpoint, said one early Kabbalist, and one must take into account where on the tree he was looking from. Each level has quite a different outlook. For the purposes of this particular book, one specific system has been adopted. For a more detailed account of the tree, see the author's The Kabbalistic Tree of Life, Tree of Life Publishing, 2009.